hours. So we will be doing that, and we did that as a group last year, and it worked very well. Just with my own students, we would gather together. In fact, at one point we were doing it for 4 days a week. We were getting together and doing this for 4 days a week. So I usually do the timing, and I also play Baroque music in the background, because Baroque music is meant to help you get into a study-like zone. And there's a lot of research about that. If you don't like Baroque music, you can turn your sound off and play other music in the background as well. But the chats before and after, during the 5-minute break, create a sense of belonging, a sense of being part of a group, everybody in the same boat, all doing something differently, but we are all working. So that is what we will do, and we'll start that from tomorrow. So the same link every day. If you have not received the link, just please write to Primzile for the ad, but you just copy and paste that Zoom link off that invitation. I will have to ask somebody to help and volunteers to come forward to help, because I'm going to be in Zimbabwe for a period of time at a conference, and also my son is getting married. So I don't want to have to work in the couple of days preceding my son's wedding. So today we are going to not start anything formal about writing. One would think that when we're starting to talk about writing, we're going to talk about how to write. And I'm not going to do that, because there are different phases to writing an article in particular. And I'm going to go into this, but one thing I'm going to tell you now is I'm only going to cover the practical things about writing at the very end of June, because I don't want you to have done anything like that yet. Just to give you a little bit of background, and I'll go into it in the talk. The act of writing and editing are so different, and people end up being stonewalling themselves, because they too often want to write the perfect sentence. And I need you to get away from that. I do not want you to write perfect sentences. That will come right at the end of the period of writing. But what you have to do to start off with is think about what you are going to write. Think about what you want to say. What have you got to support what you say? So I'm going to start a PowerPoint presentation, so bear with me as I share my screen. Can you all see that? Can one person just say yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So what I've been alluding to so far is that we've got two very distinct phases to writing an article. And the problem has been is nobody has mentally separated the two and taught you that they are two separate things. We were taught at school, especially us oldies who never had computers at school, that we mustn't have too much scratching out on a paper. So when we write an essay, you've basically got to have it perfect from the start, because the more you scratch on your paper, the more marks are going to come off. So we were conditioned through school to try and write the perfect sentence every single time. And that is completely stonewalling creativity. And believe it or not, science writing is also a creative process. The first thing that we should be doing before we put pen to paper or pen to formal paper later, we can be writing, jotting notes, drawing pictures, writing bullet lists, etc., is we're first going to think through our argument and the reasoning and make sure that we have a thread. So there's no point in starting off your writing process if you actually don't really know what you're going to be writing about. And all scientific writing is about argument. It's posing an idea and supporting it and selling it to the reader, the editor, the examiner, or whoever. So it's very important that the first stages this week, we are going to spend getting our argument back to this slide. Yeah. We are going to spend the lecture next week on looking at the introduction to a thesis and the introduction to an article. What must it do in order to be successful as an examination piece or as a journal article? Okay, so I'm now going to open the floor for discussion. Let's talk about writing, how you feel about writing, what's going to happen in the Pomodoros in the evenings, anything that you would like to talk about. So you can just unmute and let's just have open discussion. The lecture was very short because I don't like long lectures. And other experienced, I see there are some very experienced academics in the audience. Please share your experiences of creating argument. Anna, I don't want to put you on the spot, but maybe I should. If you could speak to the writing process and creating argument through it, just to get the ball rolling.
Yes, in fact, I also find that to be the most challenging for novice writers. And there are various techniques that can help you to develop your argument and to structure it. For some, it can just be bullet pointing, you know, I'm going to start there and then I'm going to say that and then I'm going to say that. Or otherwise, you can use, those fish diagrams that have got your central arguments along the spine of the fish with on the lateral fins, whatever you call them, you can put your minor points. Visually, some people work better visually, drawing a kind of a mind map. So I think there are different tools that can be used to help to develop that argument. And then for you to check the thread of the argument, that it aligns well with the objectives and with all the different components of the paper. Yeah.
Yeah, there are, if you go and Google, even go into YouTube only and go and look up argument, you'll find a lot on how to do it. And we can't teach everything, but I'm certainly somebody who would put down bullet points and make sure that there's a thread, make sure one bullet will go to the next bullet and make sure that I've got my claim, my rebuttal if it's appropriate, etc. And that's what Anna has said, is that this time before writing is very valuable in just drawing pictures for yourself, getting your argument right, finding out, and when it's clear in your head, then the writing process goes a lot more smoothly. Yunus, I see you're in the audience. You're also an accomplished writer. What are your secrets to creating an argument?
Thanks, Colleen. Yeah, it's more or less what you describe. I mean, I find one of the major issues you get bogged down with is trying to get that sentence correct, getting that paragraph correct. And for me, the way I try to get away from that is asking myself what I want to say, and then later on deciding how I want to say it. So, you know, the idea of writing down bullets, what you want to say, what you want to achieve, you're looking at your aims, and then based on your aims, looking at the literature for the arguments that support the aims of your study, looking at the literature for arguments that actually refute the aims of what you're trying to prove. That kind of thinking is what helps me to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, you've mentioned that very important point. It's everybody starts off making that same mistake, is trying to write the perfect sentence, perfect paragraph, perfect introduction before you go on to the method section. And that really is stonewalling yourself. It'll reduce your productivity incredibly. I'm going to ask.
That's why it's actually very helpful to get your student to write the first draft, because they don't get bogged down with the quality of the writing. They think in very broad strokes. So they kind of get what needs to be said written down, and then you refine it to say it the way it should be said.
You're lucky if you get students coming with the broad strokes. Sometimes I get students saying, I'm coming with a paper, because they're trying to get it perfect. And I keep saying, I'm not going to edit your paper until right at the end. I don't care if there's spelling mistakes. I don't care right in the beginning what it looks like. I'm not going to ask two of my students to give us the point of view from your side. Now, the first person I'm going to ask, and she's going to hate me for it, is Heidi. Now, Heidi is a mature student who started her PhD at the beginning of this year with an article that she worked on with me and Gert Kruger. And it was basically snapped up by a journal. It was a review type article, but her argument was very clear from the beginning right through to the end. So Heidi, could I ask you to comment on your approach to creating the argument that you did in that particular paper, knowing that it wasn't a typical IMRAD paper?
Hi, Colleen. Yes, I'm busy with multitasking at the background, so it's again my focus there. But I think if it's clear in your mind, so I was very convinced what I knew and believe, and I work a little bit backwards. So I know, and through experience, a practical experience and clinical and in theoretical. And then I had to go into the literature to look for the evidence. So mine was only a review article, but I had to go and find in the review and the literature then the evidence of what I knew and what I believed. But it's also to write a skeleton, sort of like a basic framework, and then start to fill it in. I have no specific. It's difficult to say, I do everything upside down and agterstevoor, but yeah, and it's just being that I'm busy now with my second or my third article, but it's and it's easier, I must say, and it's amazing how it develops, because I had a lot of references in my introduction, and now I'm able to write that introduction and building on, we build on the knowledge of the first article, and then the second one, and sort of like, have less of those references, and then just writing that skeleton initially, and then sort of just start to fill in.
Yeah.
I've answered.
Yeah. But what we did in that article is we made sure that every new idea was built on the previous idea that was going to lend itself to the next idea. So there was a continuity. I think what came through in your paper was there was a very strong thread. So going from the beginning, in the middle of the paper, there were lots of different things that had to come together, because that was the nature of what you were trying to do. A review article is like that. But there was always, you could always understand the next step because it was well explained in the previous step as you built up the argument.
I think in my case, because it was that initial paper and it was too much information. So it's also difficult if it's a vast subject and a topic. And then how to, do you have it all in one paper? Because it's easier to have that thread through the paper.
Yeah.
Or do you break it down in 3 or 4 different papers? And that's what I've sort of done, but it's also to keep that continuity. So yeah, it's a challenge, but we get there.
So another point to make is even a review has an argument, depending on the type of review. There's certain reviews that should not have an argument, but the type of Heidi was trying to make a point about a certain what would you call it, Heidi? It's not a medication.
Well, it's a
Supplement.
salvation pathways, and it was
Yeah.
linked to COVID and show how that affects infectious disease. So I think it is having a strong argument. You know, I knew, and
Yeah.
then
And nobody else had looked at it before. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's new. It's this new novel work, and then it's quite a lot. And then you need also to justify it from a lot of different angles, and flesh it out. But yeah, and in forming that argument. But yeah, you have to be very convinced in your mind. Sorry, I've got dogs in the background going to the beach.
Don't worry, me too.
You have to have that argument very strong in your mind, and then, like I say, and then finding the evidence and yeah, formulating it. But I can just say best of luck for everyone. And I think every paper is so different, and then because the subject matter is different, you know, whether it's a research study, or in my case, I started, and also with my PhD now, I start with the published papers, sort of just to bring a focus and a knowledge into this specific area. And then it's almost harder for me to find that experimental design, you know, what I'm going to do to prove this. And then others have that, you know, more exact, what's the experiment I'm going to do, or the clinical study, and then the papers develop from there.
Yeah, yeah. Every project, every PhD I've done, and I'm sitting on 20 done and behind me, and about another 8 ahead of me. They're all different. Not one was the same. I'm now going to ask Antoinette. Antoinette, I'm not sure if you can unmute. I know that if you're at Gray's, you often can't connect. And just in the chat, can you just say if you're available? I'd like you just to tell us about this paper and about how you had to break your head almost to make sure that your argument was absolutely clear because of all this controversy.
Hi, Colleen. Thank you.
Can you put your video on, because I think people would like to see you.
Oh, I'm in my car and I don't look great,
okay.
so I'm driving back. I think it starts by, number one, having a supervisor that believes in you, and that was you. And having, I knew for a fact that my patients with HIV and very low CD4 counts were living. And my colleagues, having been to many conferences, my colleagues were not using this. And they stated boldly in their articles, and they had published quite widely in other provinces about that this condition, it's symptomatic care, and it's a watch and wait, you do your best. And I was like, no, man, in our setting, we're not seeing this. We are using this treatment and we see it working, and we are passionate about what we are seeing, and this has to be documented. And we had 36 patients in a year and a half, and out of those 36 patients, one patient demised. And I said, this can help other patients, including we had, and half our cohort were pregnant women, because nevirapine was the drug of choice at that time. And if this can actually inform patients that nevirapine as well is causing this in our pregnant ladies. So there's multifaceted reasons why I wanted this to be published. So thank you, number one, for believing in me that I could actually do this, because I was crying half the time doing this. But I think it kind of stems from just having the confidence that you know what you see in your setting. And I think we should be bold to step out and say what we are seeing. We always rely and think that the Americans know more, or overseas people know more, or other institutions are better than us. But if you have something that you're seeing is working in your setting, I think have the confidence just to go out and state your claim and back it up with the literature. That's just my humble advice.
I I think you've made a very important point there, Antoinette, is to be confident about what your argument is about. And it's easy to have a lot more confidence when you've done the work and you've seen the results. And that other people can't argue with you because you just know. And we had a talk a couple of weeks ago, if it's last week or the week before, on imposter syndrome. We all have it. And you've just mentioned it. We feel imposters because of the West. We're imposters because of WITS and UCT. And you know what? They don't know what our situation is. We know what our situation is. We are the authorities on our turf. And they have no right to tell us what to do. We can go to them if we want to learn, but there's nothing that they can tell us that we don't, if we know it already and how it works in our setting. Now, I don't want to be arrogant here, but I get very annoyed when people try and humiliate the people that are not from the fancy countries and the fancy universities or have had awards and that kind of thing. Your work, when you do that research, you are the only person who's an authority on that area. And you should stand up and claim your authority. And that's when you're going to publish well. So that's my soapbox moment for the day. We've still got some time. I don't want to use only my own students. So please, other students who have already published, please tell us what your experience was and how you hope, what do you want to learn to help you get into the habit of writing, and just finding a camaraderie amongst us for writing. I've looked in the chat, there are no questions. So I think let's just talk to each other. Also, I'm going to pick up on people again. I don't know many of these names. I know people are always attending, so I'll just pick on you. Andre Bovell. Have you written anything yet?
Good morning. I've written, but I haven't published, and I, but I mean, I find this very useful because I'm still trying to shape my proposal submission, and so I can understand. One of the questions I had for Heidi though was the issue of, because even as you write sometimes and I'm certain it will come out as we go along, the whole issue of, for want of a better word, inertia, where you might just sit and you want to write, but for some reason the ideas are just not flowing. I don't know if persons have experienced that, and how best to combat that, because sometimes you've done all your reading, you have your literature in front of you, but for some reason you just can't get started. I think you kind of mentioned it in a sense. You kind of want to write the perfect sentence or the perfect paragraph. That could be a hindrance, but sometimes you seem to have it all together, but yet you just can't put anything down. I don't know.
Heidi, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to unmute here. I'm not 100% clear of what exactly the question was, but I think it was this sort of to get to start and how to formulate sort of your, sorry, just to recap. So you want to know how to formulate, how to get started.
Yeah, pretty much. When you have everything in place, you've done your reading, you have your literature identified, maybe you have your bullet points, but I don't know, maybe I'm kind of old school where, and I think at the start of the presentation, Colleen talked about it, where you kind of want, to read well, and the grammar and all sorts of the sentence construction, and so sometimes that interferes with flow, and so sometimes you're stuck. You're just watching everything on the paper in front of you. You find yourself in front of the computer for 30 minutes, and then you just have to just drop everything and go somewhere and come back.
I think it's
sometimes that experience.
I think it's important what Colleen said is don't have it perfect in the beginning. So the most important is the information, you know, and the flow of the thought and your content. So focus on the content. You know, and it's even for me, you know, with the whole referencing, you know, you can spend hours to get the references perfect and from the start, but focus on the content, and then you can sort of, you know, more focus on sentence construction and spelling and grammar. And then while I've submitted it to the supervisors, and even after the first submission, you know, while it's in review process, then I work on the references and to fine tune it, you know, even in EndNote, there's a lot of fine tuning you need to do. So I think the most important is first the content. And I don't know, you know, it's the way I do it, and I think I do it completely wrong and upside down, but it's, like I said, I've got a picture in my mind, and then I look in the literature for the evidence, and then I will go in an article and subtract that what is relevant and put it in the different chapters or the different headings. And it's amazing just how it all comes together, you know, all this information from the different papers, and then I link sentences and thread, but then you also have to put it sort of more in your own words. I think mine was a literature review, so you know, you bring the literature together, so it's not all scratch, you know, writing from start go. But I think, you know, use what's in the literature, and then with your own thoughts and your own words, you form the picture. But it's just for you reiterating, don't focus in the beginning on the detail, you know, more on the thought and the content of what you want to write. That's very important. And I think we all have that writer's block, you know, it's just start and go. And then if you're stuck, you know, then work on your references for a while and come back. But just don't give up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Heidi.
I'm just going to build on what Heidi was saying. There are two things to remember. Is, like I said, there are two distinct processes to writing an article. It's very much if you're going to drive to Joburg. There are two distinct processes. You plan your route. Are you going to use the N3? Are you going to go up through the Berg? Are you going to try and skip the tolls, etc.? You plan your route, and only then do you drive. If you try and do both together, when it comes to writing, you're going to be less productive than you could be. And in the next month, I'm going to help with that. That's the whole purpose of this month, is to try and help you. I'm going to give you a recipe for an introduction where you're going to have certain notes, and then you're going to take time to put those notes into a prose. You'll spend time getting it correct. But only in the last Wednesday of this month are we going to talk about going back and looking at the whole article, putting it through Grammarly, although I'm going to warn you that Grammarly is also not perfect, sending it for editing, and making sure that the golden thread works. You can actually even sometimes take a pen and link up. You can do that at times. So that's the whole point of this month, is to help you to get through that. But please, if I can implore everybody, we're going to try and separate in your mind editing from writing. It was entrenched in us at school that we had to do it in one step. We've got to get rid of that. So VG, you've got your hand up.
Hi, able to actually hear
VG?
me? Yes, can you hear me? Okay, so I haven't, yeah, am I audible? Am I audible? No.
Yes, you are.
Oh, I am, okay. So I have written a few ideas down for my PhD, but I have, just to summarize a key point.
Better now.
You can hear me now, great. Just to sort of summarize something I found trying to help our registrars and our MOs with even small abstracts, reports, is the hardest thing that they actually do find is to start. So I often say to them, just write anything down, anything at all, even if you think it's complete sort of rubbish, in a short abstract, and So I think actually, if you just can find some way in which you can have somebody start, that's half the battle sort of won, because when they start and then you review it with them and you sort of refine it, they actually find it so much easier. But the hardest step is actually to write that first few lines. And I actually tell them the exact same thing. Just write anything, even if it's complete like sort of rubbish.
Sorry, I missed what you said because I was knocked off for a couple of minutes, for a minute.
Yeah, no,
But I think what you said is
just start. The hardest thing is to actually you write the first few lines.
Yeah.
Especially for staff that have been involved in clinical work for years, and they haven't sort of for years now. They've just been writing notes on patients. You ask them, but why don't you just do a report on this patient for a abstract for the SAGE's an abstract. Yeah, just send in an abstract. It's 150 words on an interesting liver abscess or something of that sort. And those few sort of words, literally, that those 300 words to start, they find it extremely stressful. And you almost have to insist to them to say, just write anything. Believe me, even if it's rubbish, to start. So the hardest thing I find is to actually ensure that they write something. And as they start, it becomes easier after that.
BG, we're kind of losing you in between things.
Okay.
But I'm getting your point that just to put pen to paper is hard for some people. And that's hopefully what these Pomodoro sessions twice a week for the rest of the month will help with, is we'll come together and sorry, okay, I understand. We'll be coming together in the evenings, having social interaction as well as doing mostly getting down to writing. I'm not going to ask you what you're writing. It's up to you what you're writing. You can direct message me if you want some advice. I'll be there for the 2 hours, not everyone because I'm going to be traveling. But it's just time taken that is out of your normal session, that you're with other people in the same headspace and nobody's checking on anything. What I'm hoping will come out of this is that in your own discipline zones, you're going to find a community where you can continue, maybe once every 2 weeks in your own little community, having a 2-hour session where you'll continue to write together and support each other. So I'm going to try and create a fun and easy and supportive environment over the next month for people to just immerse themselves in writing. And we got to 4:30. Phumzile, can I ask you to please send out the advert again tomorrow, because somebody has requested the ad for the Pomodoros. So if you haven't received it will ask Phumzile to send it out again tomorrow. We'll start with the first one tomorrow. You don't have to attend everyone. There's not going to be a register. If you're later than 7 o'clock, it's fine. Come in. You're not going to disturb anybody. If you can only stay for half the time, that's fine. We are going to, it's just going to be camaraderie. So thank you very much for attending, everybody. Next week, we're going to look formally at how to write the introduction. So the next 2 Pomodoro sessions is either writing what you want to write or creating the argument for the paper that you might start writing the introduction for in next week. Thanks for attending, and we'll see you again next Wednesday. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.